everybody, DeeDee here, and I'm pretty excited to have this video for you, this kind of free video compared to some of the classes and journaling teachings that I do. This is just a fun project that I did for Viva Las Vegas stamps. We did a tag swap that was dress form themed, and I've got some, so that's why you'll see me doing more than one at a time here. Rather than creating one tag, I'll be creating 5 at the same time. The base is some Canson watercolor paper, and I've got these great new wire birdcage dress forms from Wow Studio. Now I have ripped some music note page in half to cover part of my tag base, and I'm using some golden matte medium, which is really great for thinner things like book pages and thinner papers like tissue paper and stuff. It's great to hold it down to glue it in place. And I'm just gonna cover the back side of the music note paper. I'm also covering the tag, and then after I lay the music note paper down, I'm covering the top as well. And this is really just it's helping the medium soak through the paper onto the background, and it's really creating a nice envelope around the fibers that are in the paper, because we really want to glue stuff down and we don't want it to be coming up later when we're working on it. And you can see that they don't all face the same way. I did try to reserve some of the paper where I could, since I was cutting it in half. A couple of them I was able to use the second half on another piece. And now they've dried, and you can see, of course, that I glued some stuff down. And I usually do, or I have been recently in the last couple months, working on an under paper, and so I was actually kind of hoping that something like this would happen, because I've been saving my under paper to use on a project later, and I don't even know what project yet, but I'm going to use it on something cool. So I actually was hoping that some of the music note paper would stick to the under paper. Now I'm just trimming up the edges of the music note paper to the tag. I really do love things sticking out of the tag, but as far as the paper base and the background goes, I really like that to be nice and square with the tag shape. Now I've pulled out some gesso. It's the Blick version of gesso, and I've also got this drywall tape that comes in these very cool, like perforated pattern. It's a lot like Punchinella, but it's paper based, and it's sticky, and it's small, super small, the holes in it. And so I'm using that to add some extra texture, and I'm putting about, I think, 2 pieces on each tag. And now I've got my gesso out, and I was trying to use a Ranger scraper, but I wasn't too happy with the way that was going, and I knew that a palette knife would give me what I want. So I got out a little palette knife, and this one's metal, and I think it comes from Design Memory Craft. And I'm using this gesso. The reason I like it, it's by Blick, and it's thick. It's not super heavy gesso, which is a little bit more expensive than regular gesso, but it's just like a nice medium grade of gesso, and it has some body to it, which I really like. And so I'm using my palette knife now to scrape some gesso around on the tag base, which now has a layer of music note paper, matte medium, and drywall tape. So this gesso is just another layer on top. I scraped it from the top and the bottom, some of the sides, and then I also tried to use it to camouflage that kind of harsh torn edge from the paper. And I heat set everything, so there's always a lot of drying going on, but I try to do most of the drying off camera. But I also want you to see where I'm drying, so I always try to do a bit of drying on camera. I've got, this is one of my favorites from the newest set of stamps that I designed for Viva Las Vegas stamps. It's a numbers background, and it's just got all these perfect little numbers. And this stamp is one of my favorites from a previous set that I designed. And this one is a Waybill invoice background, and so it's also got numbers, but it's got some lettering, some handwritten lettering, and some lines from an old invoice. And I just did some background stamping using archival ink by Ranger. And that is some glazing medium from Liquitex, and then just some basic craft acrylic paint. And the thing I like about the acrylic paints, the craft ones, is, well, one, they're cheap, and so they're good for like background techniques like this. but two, they come in such a wide variety of colors that I don't always have to mix something to get what I'm looking for. I'm using the glazing medium to extend the life of the acrylic paint, and then also it's glazing my background that I had worked on previously. So I'm brushing it on into all the nooks and crannies and crevices, which have been made from the paper and from the texture of the drywall tape, and then also from the gesso, because the gesso, it has oh goodness, excuse me. The gesso has plaster in it, so it's not shiny when it's dry, and it's got grit, and so it's holding on to some of that color as well. So now I just did some glazing with this kind of turquoise color. Make sure everything's dry, and once the acrylic, even with the glazing medium, once the acrylic paint is dry, it's dry and it's permanent, it's stuck there. It shouldn't come up and it shouldn't reconstitute without being heavily altered by a different chemical. I do often do a bit of playing around, kind of trying to figure out exactly what I want, or trying to get the image that's in my head onto my tag. And so here you can see I just got this paper from a local friend, Michelle, and she found this amazing huge dictionary, Webster's Dictionary, or at a thrift store. But I really loved the tan color that was coming off this paper, and I was trying to figure out a way to incorporate it. I wasn't sure if I wanted it to maybe be behind the dress form or even be a frame on the tag. And in the end, I just didn't even end up using it. And it just wasn't exactly what I wanted. And I don't know if I even ever figured out exactly what I wanted as far as that dark goes. But then as I'm playing around, I kind of realized that the teal is a little bit brighter than I had imagined, and I'm going for more of a vintage feel. So now I'm kind of dulling down the teal with this warm neutral gray. And I'm not putting it in the center of the tag because I already know there's going to be something else in the center of the tag. That's where I'll use my chipboard dress form. So I'm just using the gray and the glazing medium around the edges. And it also happens that around the edges is where there's the most texture anyways, because in the middle I kind of just did that paper with the matte medium, and then I did most of my gessoing and my texture making with the drywall tape around the edges, coming in from the edges and the top and the bottom. So here I go again, just heat setting that paint and making sure that everything is perfectly dry. I love the heat gun because it allows me to continue working quicker than if I had to set everything out and let it dry on its own. And now I've got the gesso back out, and I'm scraping the gesso into the center of the tag and really kind of whiting out any middle area that had been there. This is where I figure out how to add back in that kind of like rich tan color that I was looking for in the paper. And I start by blotting out the middle of each tag with this white gesso. And I'll make sure that's dry. And then I get out my little spray bottle that specifically has instant coffee in it. And I talk about this in my art journaling class a lot every time we use this. Because we're using instant coffee, it doesn't seem to mold. And I've actually had this bottle of instant coffee. It must be going on 6 months now. No lies. I used it a few months ago at art journaling, and it's the same one that I've been using. And I'm just layering it up in the background and then heat setting that in. And the thing about the coffee is that to get the darker spots, you let the coffee sit there and dry, or you heat it instead of mopping it up. Now I'm moving on to coloring my dress forms, and I'm using some Verde paint. And the idea behind the Verde paint is that it's a paint, and I'm not sure I even know all the details, but the idea behind the Verde paint is it gives you a faux rust or an actual rust, but it gives you a rust quick, so you don't have to wait over time for the rusting effect to happen. So you lay down the first layer of whatever, and I picked the iron in this one because I wanted the iron kind of to match the old school wire dress form and then to be rusty. So you do the first layer and you let it dry. And now I don't know if I'm hindering the process by heat drying, but you'll see how it turns out, right? So you do the first layer and you let it completely dry. And then you go back in and you add a second wet layer. And while it's wet, then you spray it with that blue bottle that you see there. And I know that I'm going to want to move these once I'm done. So I'm just transferring them to a tray that I have, and I put down a new piece of newsprint so that I can keep the old underpaper down. And here I go. You just make sure the paint on top is wet. It has to be the second coat, and then you spray it down. And this is the reactor. And it makes the paint react, and it makes it rust. Making sure I get every one of them. I have 5 total. And just spray, 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 and then you set that to the side. Now this one, I have not really heat set this one, and I don't know if you should because it is a chemical reaction, and I think you should give it the time. So I set those to the side and just got to working on some other pieces. This is a Viva Las Vegas Stamps butterfly stamp that I'm stamping, and all of the stamp numbers will be on my blog, in the blog post that goes with this. I stamped it once on the old book text. I stamped it once, well, I guess 6 times, and I stamped it on the back of an index card, and then I got this really great kind of like vintage, coffee colored almost tissue paper from Michelle, a local friend, and so I stamped it on there as well. Then I just took the time off camera real quick to do a ton of fussy cutting. There's no reason I should have let you see that or asked you to see that. I just used scissors and trimmed around all the little butterflies. And now I have stacked the butterflies up, and the tissue paper's on top, and then the white index card, and then the book paper. And all I'm doing now, and I don't really move my sewing machine onto camera just because it's really annoying and kind of in the way, and it's hard to photograph or hard to videotape, and I'm going to work on figuring that out so that I could show you better how I sew. But that's a long way to say right now I'm sewing the butterfly together, and I just go back and forth a couple times through the middle of each butterfly, and it connects it all together, and then now I have like a little 3-dimensional butterfly. And here are my finished dress forms, and you can see like some of them, 2 of them have a really great rust, 2 of them have a mediocre rust, and then 1 of them has hardly anything at all. I don't know why. I can't tell you why. I really don't know. I'll never know. I did give the dress forms a coat of varnish from Krylon because they really are rusty, and it starts to come off in your hands and it smells like rust, and I really just wanted them to stay. So gave that a varnish, a coat of varnish. And now I'm doing some placement, and I am going to punch a hole through these dress forms, and I couldn't get my crocodile to fit, and then I couldn't find my big bite. So I pulled out my Japanese screw punch, and it's really great. It's a spring-loaded punch with a really sharp hole at the end, like a little blade, kind of like an X-Acto knife, and you can actually get different sizes that screw on. But I'm using that to punch the hole through my chipboard and through the paper so that everything lines up. And it's really great because the Unwild Studio chipboard is super, super stinking thick. And the Japanese screw punch went through it without hardly any problem at all. And you did have to press a couple times, but it worked its way through, and it was really good. You're going to see here for a couple seconds, and this is really why I like to fast forward. I struggle for a while trying to get this. It's a piece of muslin that I've ripped off the edge of a huge section of muslin that I have for purposes like this, or for making fabric books or whatever. And I was having a really hard time trying to thread it through, and I'm trying to do a pamphlet stitch, and so that's where you wrap around and then you come from underneath and you make sure one tail's on either side of the wraparound, and you tie it in a knot and then in a bow. Well, it was way too super thick, and it just wasn't going through the hole. So I have basically now ripped my fabric in half, and it's about 36 inches long. And I always rip the muslin because I love distressed and vintage and old and worn and tattered and frayed. And so I hardly ever cut my fabric. I almost always rip it. And I say that because you can kind of see now that the fabric is like curling up a little bit, and I really like that. Not to mention, now that it's nice and thin, it's really easy to thread through the hole. And I did use a leather needle to help me with that, a leather threading needle from like the leather section of any craft store, or you could go to a Tandy store and get that. And I've tied my muslin in a bow now, and I'm going to gel medium my butterfly down. And I'll do all 5 of those real quick and make sure those are done and ready to go. And now I'm going to use another stamp from Viva Las Vegas Stamps. It says, oh goodness, let's see. Oh, your time as a caterpillar has expired. Your wings are ready. And you're going to see on the first one, I was trying to remember exactly what I ended up doing. On the first tag, I ended up using the entire saying, and it's totally fine. It's not bad or good or anything. But after I looked at the first one and I was looking at the others, I felt like it may have been a little bit too much on the tag. And so for the other 4, I just cut out the first sentence and only used your wings are ready. And I actually really like that message even more than the original because it could mean anything for anyone. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a metamorphosis, but this way everyone is kind of gathering their wings and ready to go. And so now I've got layers on layers on layers, and it's the muslin that's holding the dress form in place, and the butterfly has been glued down with gel medium. Now I'm gluing down the paper pieces of the sentiment with some Scotch two-way glue. And two-way glue just means if you use it while it's wet, then it's permanent. But if you let it dry on the back of something, then it gets tacky and it's repositionable. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, so there's that tag pretty close to finished. The only thing I do from here is I do sketch a little border on it, and actually specifically on this tag, I just dot a whole border all the way around. And that's pretty much it. Now the only difference on the others is, like I said, I trim down that sentiment from Viva Las Vegas Stamps, and I give them each a little bit of a different border, and then I sign the back. Oh, and I do also string the end of them with May Arts ribbon, the hole on each tag, but it's a silk ribbon by May Arts. It kind of comes in this like caramel color. And that's it. Thanks so much for joining me, and I hope you enjoy this free video. Definitely leave me some comments and let me know what you think, and I hope you like my project. Thanks so much. Bye.